Welcome to the party, or welcome back to the party. My name is Greta Poole and this is my YouTube channel. And today we're going to be doing book talk number 4. First, I want to talk about this book called Tactics by Gregory Kokel. I don't know how to say his last name. I apologize. This is a really good book. It's very similar to another book I referenced, I think, in my last video called On Guard, which is by William Lane Craig, because it gives good talking points for Christians when debating with non-believers. Kokel presents his arguments in entertaining ways and makes them simple by explaining each perspective. Kind of like breaks them down. Let's talk about key points. Okay, so first we have on page 54, it's called Challenge 1. I kind of put a star by it. So he lists some like questions, some rebuttals, like things like that. I'll just read it. Challenge 1. The claim is, it's not rational to believe in God, there is no proof. So what Gregory comes back and says is, what do you mean by God, that is? What kind of God do you reject? What specifically is irrational about believing in God? Since you're concerned about proof for God's existence, what kind of evidence would you find acceptable? What arguments for God have you considered, and what did you find wrong with them? I think these are really important questions when debating like an atheist or a non-believer, because a lot of times they'll throw out a bunch of like red herrings and like different things to kind of distract you from the first question that they ask, which isn't productive at all if they're trying to actually get somewhere and maybe learn from you. And I think these are really good questions to fully grasp what perspective the other person has so you can better debate with them. Another page that I marked was on 185. I know this is a controversial subject, but he kind of debunks how homosexuality is like a natural thing versus like a sin. And he says, I'll just read like a little snippet of it. He says, it's been common to justify one's sexual orientation by an appeal to nature. Some people think the claim, I was born this way, is all that's needed to stem moral criticism of their behavior. But why settle for this approach? Why think the state of nature is an appropriate guide to morality? He like gives a bunch of examples and backs up his claims. I highly suggest reading it if you want to get deeper into this subject, whether you agree with him or agree with me or whoever. And he kind of explains how comparing human desires or human sins to what animals do is kind of barbaric, because we're not animals. Like scientifically, we're animals, but morally, subjectively, we're not animals. We're not on the same level as them. God put us at a higher level. So if you are interested in that, then read this, especially this part of the book. So in my opinion, I thoroughly enjoyed this read. Kokel makes bold claims and then backs them up extremely well. He dives into controversial subjects like I just mentioned, and other subjects like pluralism and sins that are promoted by society. Honestly, book is 10 out of 10. I loved this book, and I will definitely read it again. Alright, next book. If you don't already know that I'm obsessed with Lee Strobel's books, this should verify that, because this is, I believe, the third of his books that I have read and loved. I'm currently reading a fourth one, which is In Defense of Jesus, which should be my next book talk. So the one that I finished and I'm about to review is The Case for a Creator. This one was heavy, and not in like a bad way, but more like a scientific, evolutionary kind of way. And this one is just as good as the last two, but it goes even more in depth into the other side of things, like from non-believers' perspectives, and kind of like showing like, hey, science does prove God. All these things about science that we were taught in school, like the theory of evolution, or remember right now, but there's like a lot of things that we were taught in school about science that were never actually proven, just theorized, you know. And so he goes into those and explains what is true. Darwin didn't get everything right. In fact, he didn't get most things right. But he breaks that down. Strobel breaks that all down and explains what is true, what we do know, and what we don't know. So the summary for this book, I would say, like, different from his other books, Strobel takes a more scientific approach, as I mentioned. He goes to reputable scientists, professors, scholars, etc., people who really understand what they're talking about. He doesn't just talk to some random person on the street like, hey, what do you think about the theory of evolution? No, he legitimately goes to people who spend their life's work on these topics and subjects in order to prove God and disprove things that have been taught and seen as true when they actually aren't true at all. He collects answers to burning questions about evolution, the creation of the universe, and so on. Let's talk about some key points. First one I have is page 70. He talks about the Cambrian explosion, which instead of like you know, the theory of evolution is sort of like a single cell organism, and then like things started coming out of that, or like it was like a very slow thing, elements combined, whatever, and eventually led up to the world we're living in now. The Cambrian explosion is more the idea that there was an explosion, kind of like the Big Bang, but I think it's a different thing. There's no evidence of like ancestors where we like evolve from these animals to become humans. It's more like there's an explosion, boom, life happened, elements, all this stuff appeared. That more makes sense with the evolution that we know of, like dogs evolving from wolves, like things changing, adapting over time, like not huge changes, but just like minor things over and over again. And this is more compatible with the idea that we come from an intelligent designer, aka God. So in this part of the book, Strobel interviews Jonathan Wells. He's a PhD. And in this, Wells presents us with a better idea of the theory of evolution. Another little snippet I would like to get to is on page 143. I have so many highlights because I'm going to use this in order. I'm going to use this as research in my book. By the way, I'm writing a book. Y'all will see that probably in a while from now. It probably won't be done for like another year. I'm 1/4 of the way through it. If you'd like me to talk about it or like explain what the book's going to be about, then I can do that in another video. Just let me know if you're interested. It's a Christian book. It has apologetics, theology, that kind of stuff. Okay, so first there's this little section where I think Strobel's talking to someone and they say, it's supremely improbable that the fine-tuning of the universe could have occurred at random, but it's not at all improbable if it were the work of an intelligent designer. So it's quite reasonable to choose the design theory over the chance theory. And this is where Strobel comes in with a question that kind of like, it's like, oh yeah, of course it makes sense to have an intelligent designer, because like you can't just have this without this. Like the question is, were the defendant's fingerprints on the gun because of a chance formation of chemicals, aka did the universe just happen, or because he touched the weapon, or because the creator created? I think this is a very well executed rhetorical kind of question, because it's like, it just makes you think, not necessarily that you have to answer it, but that you have to think like, oh, could this have all happened by chance, at random? Nothing comes from nothing? That doesn't really make sense. So if you think about, oh, what if there's an intelligent designer, then it's like, oh, everything else lines up. Overall, in my opinion, I personally found this to be a great book. It's very insightful. However, I will warn you that it is very science heavy, as I said at the beginning. So if you, like, I love science, and this was a lot. It was a lot. But it's not super, super hard to read. It's not like, oh, and then the theoretical, blah, blah, whatever. It's not like that. It explains every topic and explains every scientific definition of words that are like not the common person would know. It's not a light read, but it's a good one. Last up we have The Prodigal God by Timothy Keller. I loved this book. It was so good. In this book, Keller refreshes the reader on the commonly known story the prodigal son. He acknowledges its surface value, what people usually take it as in Sunday school or in sermons and stuff, but then presents other meanings and the perspectives of each person of the story. So some key points. First one would be page 18. It goes on from page 18 to page 19. I just think this is really strong statement to start out the book, right out the gate. So he says, if the preaching of our ministers and the practice of our parishioners do not have the same effect on the people that Jesus had, then we must not be declaring the same message that Jesus did. If our churches aren't appealing to younger brothers, like in the prodigal son, they must be more full of elder brothers, like the older brother in the prodigal son, than we'd like to think. I just think this is a really revealing quote, because if your church is full of people who think they're all these high and mighty people who think they're entitled to certain privileges or to certain things, and not filled with a mix of people who need Jesus, everybody needs Jesus, but if it's just full of people who think they're better than everyone else and that they're doing the best things that they can be doing and thinking that they're above other people, that's not good, because you need those other people who are yes, I wronged people, I've sinned, I'm a bad person, but I'm willing to come in here and change myself and be more Christ-like. If your church isn't bringing in more people who need Jesus, who want to learn about Jesus, and have more people that are thinking they're better than everyone else, then something's wrong. And then another thing, 63, this is also a convicting statement. It says, it is impossible to forgive someone if you feel superior to him or her. It's kind of similar to that first quote that I read, if you think you're the elder brother thinking you're better than your younger brother, or think you're better than somebody else because you're stronger in your faith or you've been a Christian a longer time, then how can you forgive somebody who's wronged you if you still think you're better than them because they wronged you? So in my opinion, this was a 10 out of 10. It stems from a familiar story, the prodigal son. It's easy to read, it's a fast read too, because it's less than 200 pages. And I'm a fan of telling it like it is when it comes to the truth, and that's exactly what Timothy Keller does. So yeah, this one is probably my favorite out of all of these, because there was so much, it just comes from different perspectives of all of the characters of the story, even Jesus's perspective, which arguably is the most important one. So this one was my favorite, and it's really good, easy to read, anybody can read it. So I got all of these on Amazon, I think. But yeah, that is book talk number 3. That is all. Make sure to subscribe, and comment if you want to see any more book talks. If you have book recommendations, please leave them down below. I'm always interested in reading more. If you've read any of these, or if you are reading one, please let me know if you like it, if you think it's good, whatever. And yeah, that's all I have for you. Thank you for watching, and God bless.